What if the greatest work of the second half of life is not physical health, financial security, or even relationships, but the spiritual life you've yet to live? Welcome to We Have a Spiritual Problem, a podcast where we confront the deeper questions beneath our personal struggles and collective crises. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong. I am not a theologian or a philosopher, or at least in training. I am a PhD exercise physiologist with an interest in the intersection of the physical and the spiritual. My guest is Ron Kastner, author of A Life Well Lived, Finding Health, Vitality, and Joy After 60. You may recognize Ron from his appearance on the Aging Well podcast, where we discuss his remarkable health journey. But recently, Ron has experienced something more than physical renewal, a spiritual reawakening. In this conversation, we'll explore how childhood beliefs shape lifelong worldviews, what it means to say we have a spiritual problem, and how meaning, community, and purpose might be missing pieces in modern life. Ron will share insights, practices, and reflections on cultivating spiritual life, whether within a faith tradition or beyond it. Ron, welcome to We Have a Spiritual Problem. We've had you as a guest on the Aging Well podcast a couple years ago. That's where we talked about your health journey, and we shared your book, A Life Well Lived, Finding Health, Vitality, Joy After 60. But recently you had a bit of an awakening, or should I say a reawakening religiously. Tell us a little bit about this, and we'll explore this a little bit more deeply.
Well, it's been over time. It wasn't recent. As you know, my book talks about almost 20 years ago now, I had this awakening about health, that I was in my late 50s, and I had two very, very young daughters, infant, 6 months and 3 years, and I was an older dad, and I said, the only thing that matters to me is staying healthy for them. And so it launched me into a journey of health and how to stay alive longer and all that other stuff. And you can't spend too much time in the health space without going, pardon my French, but holy shit, how does all this stuff work? And it all works beautifully and seamlessly together. I think it was Scott Peck who said in Road Less Traveled, the miracle of health is that not more stuff goes wrong, because it's so complicated and it's so fragile. And you read about all these medical conditions that happen to people like that, and you just go, how does it all stay okay? And where did it come from? And that question, just kind of goes, you sort of sit there and go, this is what an amazing thing to be alive at all. And to me, that was the reawakening of the spiritual stuff. That was the moment. There wasn't a moment. It wasn't like the insight I had, about the health, but it was a gradual kind of, this is incredible,
Yeah.
And the article I just wrote is that that doesn't have to be. A lot of people, when they get older, double down on their childhood religions and go back to that. And if they find comfort there, that's fine. But for me, it was, hey, I can build this from the ground up. And I don't have to, I can use the other religions, which many of them are valid, and many of the metaphorical messages of the religions are valid, but I can pick and choose. It's mine, Yeah. And if I want to be a spiritual person as I get older, the world's my oyster on that. So anyway.
So how did your childhood religious experience shape your kind of current spiritual, philosophical perspective and shaped your worldview?
I'm laughing because I was raised Jewish in Newark, New Jersey. If you ever read a Philip Roth book, that's where I was raised. I knew him. He was a generation ahead of me, but it was a Jewish, mainly immigrant community. And I was raised as a good little Jewish boy. And I got bar mitzvahed and all that other stuff. I learned I learned how to read Hebrew. I never understood it. It's 5 years of Hebrew school. You start when you're 8 and you end when you're 13. And there's this big party called your bar mitzvah and all this other stuff. But a weird thing happened to me. One of the tragedies of my early life is that my father died when I was 7, which became one of the poignant things about my health journey, because I said, I don't want my daughters to go without a dad, So my mother kind of fell apart. It was just me and her. I was an only child. And my mother kind of fell apart after my father died, as you would, but it kind of never cured. And one of the things she did was bring me to when I was like 7 or 8. I mean, it's right after my father died. She brought me it was a special trip, I remember. We took the afternoon off school, which is really rare. She came and got me, and we went to downtown Newark, and we saw the 10 Commandments, all 3 hours, the Charlton Heston version. And there, she said, this is about your religion and, your God and what's important. And then she said, God punished us by taking Daddy away because we were bad. You and I were bad. We must have been bad. We don't know what we did, but we must have been bad. And God punished us. And there I was, a 7 or 8-year-old kid, watching God kill Egyptians left and right, and saying, if you don't obey my laws, you're toast. That was the Old Testament God that I was introduced to, and it scared the life out of me, and so I doubled down on being a good little boy, and only later on could I just go, whoa, that's not real. That's not God. That's certainly not the God of the Christian religion, who was, a compassionate, loving God. So it was a real awakening when that happens, to say, I don't have to do this. And in my teens, I just became an atheist basically for the rest of my life, until this recent, reawakening. But it was always in the background somehow, some way. There was always an acknowledgement of the power of the universe and the cosmos and, life and all that other stuff. So anyway.
Yeah. So when you hear the phrase, we have a spiritual problem, what does that mean to you?
I think Walter Isaacson just wrote a book called The Greatest Sentence Ever Written. And the sentence is, we hold these truths to be self-evident, and it's about the U.S. experiment, the American Revolution and the U.S. experiment. And I haven't read it yet. I have it here. I just did watch the Ken Burns series on the American Revolution, which is stunningly good. And I agree that that's one of the most important sentences ever written in history, and it shaped, much of what's happened in the world for the past 250 years. But I think the greatest sentence ever written, above all, is the one that's attributed to Jesus, written by some guy, whoever wrote the Bible. And that is, the kingdom of God is spread upon the earth, but men do not see it. And when you think about that, you just go, what do we focus our time on? And why? And to me, the fact that we're alive, and the fact that we're going to die one day, and the appreciation of life, and the appreciation of what we've been given in life, is really the biggest question we can have every day. You know, it's just, and yet we spend our time doing all kinds of kooky things. Um, every day there's new things invented to spend your time diverting yourself from that very basic fact of being alive and how
Yeah.
wonderful and incredible it is. So that's the spiritual problem. It's not what you believe and what you practice and all that other stuff. It's like, you look at this is, I'm alive, I'm breathing, and that's not gonna be the case forever. you know anyway.
So, regardless of one's specific beliefs, are there values or principles that you believe are universal and can help us find health, vitality, and joy?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first one is that we appreciate that everybody is in this mess with us, or this joy and this mess. There's a great Thich Nhat Hanh quote, to the effect is, life is both deplorable and joyous. It can be both. And awareness and consciousness of both aspects of life uh, is what he calls mindfulness is all about. You know, um, and the fact that, when in yoga, or in, when somebody goes like this and bows to the other person, it's big in the Japanese culture as well. It's like acknowledging you and I are in the same boat. So, and there's a lot that I can learn from you, and there's a lot you can learn from me if we just live that way. And that's a big, big, big deal. And I think from a moral standpoint, you know, Christianity and Buddhism probably, Christianity practiced the way it was meant to be practiced, probably touch that the closest. That is, we're all in this together, and our the things we have in common, i.e., being alive, are vastly outweigh our differences.
So, with that in mind, what practices or tools, whether they're spiritual, secular, or scientific, do you believe help individuals or communities address spiritual or existential struggles? You mentioned
Um,
yoga.
well, yoga is one of them. Um, I mean, I can only say what works for me. It's a constant internal challenge to keep that focus. It's not easy. Um, and to me, it works best. I find I can be best to other people when I'm being good to myself. I mean, I have a long history of, not appreciating myself as much as I should, even though I tried to compensate for it throughout my life by being successful in business and theater and, like, lots and lots of other things. Um, and I just think, to me, it is self appreciation, and all the things I do, for my own health, and learning through the internal, um, side of me. And if I do that well, it enables me to convey that to other people, so that they can take it or not. But it enables me to communicate that in the most effective way that I can. I mean, I've been doing this newsletter, and I'm writing another book now, about later life as well. Um, for 2 years now, and with limited success. There is a big part of the world that does not want to hear what I have to say, which is, I'm sure that's the case with you too. It's this world of health, later life health, and of actively looking after yourself, despite all the benefits that it gives, extra time, extra pleasure, extra health, people just don't want to do it. It's too much work. It's
easier to go with those biohacks and take all the shortcuts, take the drugs.
Or listen to somebody who's making a ton of money on their supplements or blah 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 blah. There's this new. There are no wonder drugs and there are no superfoods. There's no magic pill. It's the same thing that the universe. That the ecological universe has been doing for however long it's been going on, millions and billions of years, which is that you try something, you do something, you stretch yourself, and your body adjusts, and your body compensates and heals stronger. It's evolution in progress. So.
Yeah, that's principle of overload that we talk about in exercise science. To me, it applies across the board. We've kind of evolved on the other podcast, and that's why this podcast exists now, is because we've really leaned in a lot more into the importance of the spiritual and emphasizing that. We talk about well-centered fitness as the SPIES model, the spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social. And all those things, if we're going to grow across the board, we have to, like you say, stretch yourself. And, the body, the spirit, the mind, everything is going to adapt according to the pressures that we put on it. And I also think that's a big part of why we have some of the conflict that we have in life, is in order to grow us spiritually, physically, intellectually, emotionally, and socially.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I've been a big fan of psychotherapy for most of my life because I think it's a great tool. It dovetails really well with the spiritual world. A lot of people say, oh, well, religion and psychology don't really mix. They're two separate realms, but I just don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I think that the new book I'm writing is called Days of Wonder. And I think there's a level of wonder to life that is extra, not only, but extra accessible as you get older. In other words, you can look back on your life. There's not as much pressure. There is an experience. You can step back in a way that I couldn't when I was working and doing and everything else, and just sit there and go, wow, and that's an increasingly common experience for me now, and I love it. It's a great way to live,
Yeah.
So
we did one of the early episodes on this podcast. I had my friend Lauren Axelrod was a guest, and she was telling me a story about a friend of hers that had had a stroke and was left with only 2 words that she could say. It was fuck and wow. And her friends were all like, oh, this is horrible. And she's, no, this is beautiful. Think about it. I mean, what other words do we need to express, life? It's like, and there's so many different ways that we can use the F word, that it can mean something beautiful, or it can mean something horrible. It can mean an act of something that is very beautiful, or it can be an act of something that, when we F something up, and I think that's what we need in this world, is just that that thought of just having those two words, and maybe, and she added, and maybe thank you is, kind of,
Yeah.
an additional phrase, but that's what I'm hearing is what you were talking about there, is we kind of lose that sense of wonder. And I'm wondering, where do you think we lose that at? I mean, did some of your wonder get lost from the moment you saw the Ten Commandments? Did that start to maybe pull away some of that?
I don't know about if I think my wonder got a little buried.
Yeah.
It was replaced by fear. But there was a part of me. That's the beauty of the psychotherapy. There's a part of you that the wonder that we had when we were little kids, and some of it's pre-verbal, some of it's the first couple of years of life and whatever. You think you look at a kid, and I did it with my own daughters, but every time I see a small infant, that's all they are curiosity. They're just curiosity, pure curiosity. And what's this? And what's this? And what's this? And who is this person? And am I going to be loved by this person? Am I not going to be loved? Am I going to be yelled at by this person? It's just like they're just navigating this incredibly new experience, and part of us, I think, never loses that. Never loses that, and this is what gets reawakened at this point, at this time of life. And like I said, it's pretty wonderful. It's not, it's not 100%. It doesn't. It's not. I don't live my life in bliss 24 hours a day. And there's a lot of stuff in the world that is just not fun to do, but you got to do it, and this, that, and the other thing. But as much as possible, I try to do that, and it just has enhanced my life immeasurably. So
how do we begin to foster that sense of purpose, connection, awesomeness, wildness, even if we don't identify necessarily with a specific faith or belief system?
I think it happens from the inside. I think it happens through your body. I think I'm one of the things I'm doing this year is I'm studying to be a yoga teacher. I've been working at yoga for a long time, and I have a great friend, and we talked about it. She said, "You could do this," and I said, "Really?" She said, "So I'm starting now to be," and we did. I did a little online, one of her classes online, two of them over the past couple of days, and it was just simple body awareness, body consciousness, and like I said at the start of the podcast, if you can appreciate the wonder of what's going on inside of you every second, that is a big, that's a big deal, because that's the way the universe works. There's stuff going on every second that just keeps your life intact, and the fact that we don't appreciate it is just, that's the quote that I said, God's world is spread upon the earth, but men do not see it. That's the stuff. It's the kind of like the underlying existence, rather than all the stuff on the surface that we spend our time doing, whether it's screens, whether it's television, whether it's computers, whether it's, even, you say, well, you look at a sunset or a sunrise and you go, oh, wow, that's so beautiful. But what's really beautiful is the system that is appreciating that, and the interchange between what you're looking at and the subjective side, which is the system that can appreciate that. I think the internal journey is the start for all that. There are some people who would say, um, do something nice for somebody, and that's the beginning of compassion and spirituality. That that works for some people, and I think that's a wonderful thing to do. Joseph Campbell, who is like my, I've read most of his stuff, writes about mythology and all that other stuff, has been my guru about this world of spirituality and stuff. And he has a whole thing about fix yourself first. Find 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 your way through life and find your own path and then tell others about it. And that's what I've chosen to do. That's not everybody's, that's not everybody's way, but that's the one that works for me.
Yeah, I keep hearing, you mentioned the greatest sentences, and one of probably my top 5 sentences, if I were to say these are top 5 sentences, would be love your neighbor as yourself. And
Yeah.
what I'm hearing from you is like, we got to start with loving ourselves first, that we're not as capable of loving others. And it's not about, how we love ourselves. So if I don't love myself, then I don't have to love anybody else. It means learn to love yourself first, and then you're going to extend that to other people.
Yes. When you think of self-compassion, I mean, I make the case throughout my book and throughout my the articles I've written, that health is the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself and others. If you want to be compassionate to your kids as an older person, stay healthy, because you're going to give them your best years, your wisest years, and you're going to avoid all the crap that kids have to do with aging, sick parents. That's the best gift you can possibly give them, and you're doing it for yourself. So anyway, I mean, health and compassion are synonymous. They're
Right.
they're just not. One cannot exist without the other. So.
Yeah, you're always preaching to the choir with me.
I can tell by the smile on your face.
Yeah. So are there ways to bridge the divides between people with different spiritual or philosophical perspectives, kind of work toward shared goals?
Well, I think
makes sense.
I think if you say, my way is the only valid, true way, there's not much room for communication. I think I think by being open about, the last half of the 19th century was a wide open space for religion. There's a lot of stuff that the Unity movement started and the Chautauqua movement started, and there's a lot of stuff that happened in the post-Darwin world, because you couldn't get the evolutionary message of Darwin, the scientific evolutionary message. Nietzsche said this as well. Religion is dead, God is dead. What he wasn't saying that that the forces that created the universe are dead. He was saying existing religion is dead. You couldn't appreciate all the new scientific discoveries and square that with the books that were written 2,500, 2,000 years ago, or 2,500 years ago. And, nonetheless, those books and history, there's no book in Buddhism, but there's lots of stories and this, that, and the other thing, have a lot of validity metaphorically.
Mm-hmm.
They just, and that's where the treasure is. That's where the gold is. So if you're walking around saying, no, this is the way the world was created, or in the Quran, there's like all kinds of edicts and this, that, and the other thing. Um, but if you look behind it and you look, here's the underlying morality of what is supposed to happen here, in these religions, then you have some common ground, interfaith common ground. And I think there's a whole bunch of people who say they're not religious and they're spiritual.
Mhm.
Um, and, whatever that means to them is fine, you know. But just like you said, that needs to grow. That needs to that needs to be part of their daily existence, and they need to foster it. They need to water it and have the seeds grow into something, because I think it's a big part of our existence that modern life discourages and disparages. Um, you know, so
Yeah, I've become a huge fan of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who was
mhm.
um, you've heard of him. He's a paleontologist and a Jesuit priest. And I mean,
Yeah,
what most
yeah,
polar things can you expect to see in science and religion? And yet he pulled the two together to help us understand that, you know, we're, I think we're at the end of our biological evolution. I think mankind's not going to develop any new characteristics or features that are going to help us to live any differently. But now we're full force into this spiritual evolution, which means in order to evolve, you have to have tension and things that are going to force us to change. But we're evolving toward more greater compassion, unity, and love.
uh-huh.
And to me, that's beautiful. I love that idea and it
Yep,
doesn't matter religion wise. And
yep,
if we think of Christ as the omega point, because I have a lot of friends, I'm a Christian myself, but I struggle with this idea when people say, "Well, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and that's the only way, and the only way you're going to get to heaven is to be Christian." It's like, well, wait a minute. No, I don't think that's what Christ was teaching, because if you go to John 17, was it John 3:17, where he says that 3:16 everybody knows, because that's at every ball game, the guy with the funky wig on and all that kind of stuff saying,
right.
God gave his only begotten son to, whoever believes in him will have eternal life. But then you go to the
Right.
next verse, it says he didn't come to condemn the world, he came to save the world. And so
Absolutely.
that means everybody. And I think that's what we have to understand, is that, like the electrocardiogram, I'm always going to physiology, we're getting different viewpoints of the spiritual. And some of those viewpoints are coming from people who identify as atheist or agnostic. They come from the Jewish faith. They come from Buddhism. They come from, the Native American faiths and traditions, and, the Incas. And, every religion has got some perspective on God, and none of us are absolutely right. And I think we have
No.
to understand that where's the commonality in who and what spirituality is. And
Yeah.
from our combined faith, the Judeo-Christian traditions and the books, God only describes himself two ways: I am and love.
Hmm.
And what else do we need besides that to be successful as a human species?
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with you. I think the struggle of evolution over the 4.5 billion years of that life has existed, um, came to a head, probably somewhere around 2500 BC, when the Upanishads and all these other people started going, you know, started saying, that, okay, we have everything we need. We have reached the point of daily struggle, of to put enough food on the table, and now we can pay attention to other things, you know, um, and um, and that has been going on now for 5,000 years, 4 or 5,000 years, in the evolution of all the religions. Sorry, I'm getting some
But
weird
that's
lighting
okay.
here. There's some sunshine coming out, um, and um, and it's part of the human condition. But I think the whole point of it was, okay, we now don't have to do all this stuff we do every day to get food on the table. There's enough economic freedom, even though it was, comparatively ancient compared to what we know today. But now we can sit here and go like this and go, hey, look at this universe that we live in. Isn't it amazing? You know? And there's wow again, you know?
Yeah.
And isn't it amazing? And I think that is the commonality of all religions and all spiritual stuff. There's our individual conditions are miraculous on a second to second basis, you know, um, and it's pretty special. It's just
Oh, it's
pretty
very
special.
special. So, how do we create those spaces where these conversations about spirituality, beliefs, and meaning are safe and inclusive?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I really don't. I think the best place to start is just to have them, and try to make people feel safe talking about it. Um, and it's a case by case. I'm going to write a book about that. You know, uh, or I'm writing a book about that. And there are, it's a small percentage, but there's uh, an slowly increasing percentage of people who live in what I will call a transpersonal world or transpersonal existence, where their awareness of all that other stuff is as big as their awareness of the day-to-day, stuff that most people spend their time doing, and that's a start. That's a start.
What
Um,
I'm hearing is
is
the way
there
to create the space is be the space.
is there uh, is there a bigger meme that will be created? Possibly, but only by people doing this. You got to think that every religion started with one person um, seeing something that other people didn't see, and telling other people about it, their disciples or their whatever, every one of them. And if you think about it that way, we all have the power to create a world for ourselves that is meaningful and makes sense. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to start a new religion, but the internal workings um, of that exist in all of us. There's a really cool book that I read a long time ago called Cosmic Consciousness, written by a guy named Richard Buck. And there again, it was the latter part of the 19th century. And he said that the cosmic experience, this experience of wonder and you know uh, um, the universal existence, was not just the province of the people who started the major religions, but he's got about 100 or 200 other people in history, from Socrates. It starts out with Jesus and Buddha, but but he has a whole bunch of other people, Dante, and a whole bunch of writers, and a lot of the Catholic saints, and whatever. And they all had one thing in common, which is they 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 saw life on their own terms. When they were roughly in their early 30s, they had this giant awakening, and then they spent the rest of their lives telling other people about it, you know? And
Yeah.
it's a wonderful book to read because you realize this is not just the province of a few special people. And that's just the people who wrote about it or who became famous by it. But there's have the conversations. You'd be surprised, and find effective ways to have those conversations, and you'd be surprised how many people this is just not, I mean, my daughter, when I speak to my daughters, when I talk about this stuff, they go, "Oh, Dad, stop being so heavy," but they're 18 and 21. So,
Yeah.
so that's, people like to stay light. That doesn't work for me.
Yeah. I'll have to send my son to you. My son's he's a junior in college working on a arts and letters degree, and he's taken philosophy and Greek and Latin and all
Oh,
these.
cool.
And he comes home every day and it's like, oh, what deep conversation am I getting into? And this and that philosopher and what they're doing. Like he just
Lucky
finished
you.
with, it's amazing. I mean, I got a PhD in exercise physiology, but then, he starts talking. It's like, boy, I feel dumb. I forget all this stuff, but it's great. I mean, he prompted me, I've been reading a lot of Teilhard, and he was talking about Thomas Aquinas, and it's like they're very similar. And I was talking about Teilhard, and he said, well, it sounds like he kind of derived a lot of his stuff from Aquinas. And I said, I don't think that's quite true. I think he kind of came along it himself. I mean, he was a Jesuit priest, so he probably was at some point, at least, affected by him a little bit. And so I immediately went online and I found the book about the two. So I'm reading that right now so that I can kind of join in that conversation a little bit more intellectually. But it's fun to think like that.
It's a testament to you that he's heading in that direction. He didn't get that stuff from, thin air. Do you know what I mean? So, so I'd be very proud of that. That would be great. I mean, I've got my oldest daughter is in vet school. So, and I'm so proud of that because she wants to deal with life. She doesn't want to deal with business or AI or everything else. And my younger daughter, she starts university in September, and she's on her, what they call gap year in London, in the UK, wants to be a psychologist. She wants to deal with people and humans, and but the whole world of manipulating numbers and business and this, that, and the other, it's just foreign to them. So I'm very happy with that.
Okay, so I'm going to get profound with you. Since we're talking about kind of these deep thoughts, and I know you got to go here shortly, so I'm going to ask you kind of one last question. A number of episodes ago, I had Stephen Puri on. I don't know if you are familiar with Stephen. He was a executive vice president for Sony and I forget what other big kind of media companies, and he left all that to kind of create an app that kind of is to help bring people together. But I had him on the podcast, and he posed a question to me that I now call the Puri question that I ask of some of my guests. And he asked me, if you had a magic wand that you could only use once, but you can use it to change anything in the world, what would you change? Is there anything you would change with that magic wand that you can only use once and was powerful enough to change the entire world, the entire universe?
It goes back to that sentence. It would be that men and women were more aware of the world of God and the world of that created the universe in their daily lives. And I think that would fix a lot of stuff. I like
that answer.
Yeah.
My answer was that I would destroy it. I would break it and bury it because I shouldn't have that power to make that change. Because I immediately go to ideas like, in the conversation with him, I said, well, if I were to wave that wand and just eradicate racism, who's to say that there's somebody out there who, because of their experience with racism, is going to go on to do something far greater than my waving that wand and just changing it's going to do. And so it's like, I don't want to have, that's too much God power for me, and I just don't want it. But I like your answer.
I'm down with that. I'm down with your answer as well, because that, stuff doesn't happen that way, So,
but it's a fascinating thought question. So I like your answer, and I'll have to ponder that more.
I think if people were more aware of the miracle of their lives every day, the world would be profoundly changed. Yeah. So. Anyway.
And I think that's what the two of us are trying to do with what we do in our lives, is we're trying to kind of peel back some of those layers and show people, just how meaningful life really is and how to lean into the wonder.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Was there anything we failed to talk about? You got a book coming out, but there's no publication date or anything like that.
No, not yet. It's not. It's a couple of chapters and a bunch of stuff, and the editor I'm working with says, I don't even want to see it until it's done. So I said, can I give you some chapters? Nope. I want to see the whole thing all at once.
Right.
So
I'm looking forward to that, because I really enjoyed the first.
The first one took over 10 years to write. So this one's going to be shorter, and it's, I think it's going to be easier, but it's still going to take some time. So anyway.
And your other book is still available, so people can find that on Amazon and other sources.
A Life Yet to Live. And it's still there. And my website at ronkastner.com, I still do a weekly newsletter, about whatever's on my mind. Some of it's religion, some of it's health, some of it's all kinds of things. Empty
They're
nest.
always good. I love getting those emails with your newsletter in them.
Empty nest, So anyway, that's my latest adventure in life. Empty nest and yoga instructor. So
great. All right. Anything else you want to leave this audience with?
No, I just like to thank you. I just like to thank you for reaching out. The religion article, believe it or not, has been a very popular one, and I've gotten a lot of comments on it. I put it on Medium as well, and I've gotten a lot of comments on it. So, it's clearly on people's minds. So thanks for having this conversation.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I always love talking to you, Ron. I can't believe it's been that long since we've had the conversation on the other podcast. So we will have you back on this one or the other one somewhere along the line, but I enjoy talking to you.
Anytime. Okay.
All right. Well,
thank you.
Be good to yourself. Keep being good to others.
Okay. Thank you so much.